All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking at the psychology of trading. A
Oh.
lot of people want to understand what makes a successful trader. And you know what? To really get to the bottom of this, you sent over some selections from The Disciplined Trader by Mark Douglas.
Yeah, this book is really interesting. I think Douglas really doesn't shy away from the hard truths
Mm.
about trading,
Right.
especially the mental side of it.
Oh, absolutely.
And his journey to that understanding is pretty remarkable, like starting with bankruptcy.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it makes you wonder, like,
Yeah, right.
what kept him going after something like that.
Right.
But let's rewind a little bit because the book starts off with this, 90% loser statistic.
Right.
Douglas is claiming that the vast majority of traders actually consistently lose money.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, it's a very stark reminder that markets are essentially zero sum.
Right.
Particularly, in futures trading, which is
Sure.
what Douglas focuses on. One trader's win is another trader's loss.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be consistently, coming out on top,
Right.
you need a real edge.
Okay.
And Douglas argues that, that edge is as much psychological
Oh, wow.
as it is strategic.
So you're saying it's not just enough to have, a good system in place. You
Yeah.
need to have like the mental fortitude to actually execute that system
Exactly.
consistently,
Yeah,
even when things are maybe not going your way.
absolutely.
And this is where I think Douglas's story really kind of comes in.
Yeah.
Because he went all in on trading in Chicago, ended up in debt, ultimately filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah, it's a tough story.
And it's a pretty good example of how things can go wrong,
Right.
even if you have everything planned out.
Yeah, and it really forced him to confront some very hard truths about himself
Right.
and, his beliefs about trading.
Oh, yeah.
It's really easy to blame external factors,
Mm-hmm.
when things go wrong in the market. It must be the Fed, it must be,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
But what Douglas really realized was that his own psychology, his fears, his insecurities, even his deeply held beliefs
Oh, wow. Wow.
were actually contributing to his struggles.
So he was kind of setting himself up for failure
Yeah, in a way.
without even realizing it.
Exactly. And that's what he called the energy loop.
Okay.
This feedback mechanism
Mhm.
between our mental environment, our beliefs and expectations,
Yeah.
and our physical environment, the actual events and outcomes we experience.
Yes.
He realized that our beliefs actually shape our perceptions,
Wow.
even if those beliefs are inaccurate
We're in
or
the-
even limiting.
So are you saying we're kind of like prisoners to our own beliefs?
Uh, I wouldn't say it's quite that deterministic.
Okay.
I mean, we do have the capacity to change our beliefs,
Right.
but it takes a lot of conscious effort and self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I think that the first step is really to uncover those hidden beliefs
Okay.
that might be driving our actions, and particularly the ones that are limiting us or creating internal conflict.
So how do we even begin to like uncover these hidden beliefs? Like I know Douglas talks about an exercise where you use the phrase I am.
Right. He calls that the I am exercise. And it's very powerful for self-discovery.
Okay.
It's about identifying, the underlying beliefs that shape our perceptions
Right.
and even our actions,
Okay.
even if we're not consciously aware of them.
So how does this exercise work?
So imagine you sit down, with a pen and paper,
Okay.
and you just start writing down, a series of statements that begin with I am.
All right.
You just write down anything that comes to mind,
Mm-hmm.
no censoring, no editing.
Okay.
You might write things like, I am a good trader, or, I am afraid of losing money.
Got it.
I am worthy of success.
Okay.
You might even write something like, I am not good at math,
Right.
whatever comes to mind.
Right. So just kind of like a brain dump.
Yeah, just keep writing until you feel like you've exhausted
Okay.
all the I am statements that are in your mind.
Okay. I got it.
Now, here's the interesting part.
Okay.
Once you have a good list,
Hmm.
you go back and you cross out any statements that are simply facts,
Okay.
right? So things like, I am tall, or I am left-handed, or, I am a woman.
Right.
Those are just objective truths about yourself.
Okay.
Those aren't beliefs.
Okay.
What you're left with are the statements that reveal your beliefs,
Oh, okay.
your subjective interpretations
Okay.
of yourself and the world.
So the ones that are left over, those are the ones that are important.
Yeah, those are the keys
Okay.
to understanding, what your subconscious beliefs are
Right.
about yourself and your capabilities.
So what do we do with those?
Well, by analyzing, those remaining I am statements,
Yeah.
we can begin to see patterns
Okay.
and potential conflicts.
Okay.
So, for example, you might discover that you hold the belief, I am a talented trader,
Right.
but you also believe, I am afraid of taking risks.
Right. How does that work?
Well, those two beliefs are in direct conflict with each other,
Ah.
and they could be creating a significant mental block.
Right.
It's like having one foot on the gas
Yeah.
and one foot on the brake.
You're not going to get anywhere.
You're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And until you actually become aware of those conflicting beliefs,
Right.
they'll continue to operate in the background, and
Wow.
they'll sabotage your efforts.
So by doing this exercise,
Mm-hmm.
we can start to identify these beliefs that might be holding us back.
Exactly. And that awareness is the first step
Okay.
toward changing those beliefs
Okay.
and creating a more empowering mental framework for trading.
But just being aware of them isn't enough.
No, it's not enough.
We need to actively try to change those beliefs.
Right.
Douglas was able to turn his trading around
Right.
after, he went bankrupt. He
Yeah.
didn't just stay in that, negative mindset.
Yeah, he hit rock bottom. And he realized that he couldn't keep blaming,
Yeah.
External factors for
Right.
his failures.
Yeah.
He had to take responsibility
Okay.
for his own psychology, his own beliefs and behaviors.
So then that begs the question, why do we even trade?
Right.
I mean, it's obviously not just about survival at this point.
Right.
For most people,
There's something deeper.
there's something deeper going on.
Yeah.
What does Douglas say about that?
Douglas argues that we trade to fulfill needs and desires that go beyond basic survival.
Okay.
Money in this context becomes a means to an end.
Okay.
It's a tool for expressing ourselves in the world,
Right.
creating the lives we want,
Right.
and achieving our goals.
So it's about more than just the money. It's
Yes.
about what the money represents. It's
Exactly.
about what it allows us to do or be or whatever.
Yeah. And here's the thing.
Okay.
When money becomes tied to our sense of self-worth,
Yeah.
our security, our ability to fulfill our desires,
Yeah. Okay.
it can trigger some very powerful emotions.
yeah.
Like greed, fear, and insecurity.
Definitely.
And these emotions, particularly the fear of scarcity, can really distort our perceptions.
Right.
And lead to some pretty irrational decisions.
And that fear of scarcity, is that the feeling that there's not enough to go around?
Yeah, not enough to go around.
And that can really drive market behavior.
Absolutely.
That's kind of like a primal instinct.
Yeah, it is a primal
It's
instinct.
like when we feel threatened or insecure.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Douglas suggests that a lot of the volatility and irrationality that we see in the markets
Mm-hmm.
stems from this primal fear.
Oh, wow.
You think about it.
Yeah.
When people believe there's a shortage of something essential,
Okay.
like computer chips or oil or, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
their fear of missing out actually drives up prices
Right.
and creates kind of a self...
Once people think that their money's not safe,
Mm-hmm.
they all run to withdraw it.
Exactly.
And that creates the very crisis they were afraid of.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And in the market, this fear of scarcity manifests itself in a multitude of ways.
Okay.
Often leading to irrational behavior that defies logic
Right.
and even sound analysis.
So we're going to explore that further in part 2,
I'll dive into that in part 2.
where we really look at how this plays out
Absolutely.
in real-world trading scenarios.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Okay, so we're back, and, we've been kind of talking about these beliefs, about trading, about ourselves, even the nature of money,
Right
and
on.
how that can impact our actions in the market.
Yeah, we can get so caught up in the fear of missing out or
Right.
fear of losing what we have
Right.
that we make impulsive decisions that go against our own best interest.
And Douglas has this really interesting example in the book. You know that story about the guy offering free money
Oh, yeah.
on Michigan Avenue?
Yeah, that's a classic illustration of how our beliefs can blind us
Yeah.
to opportunity.
They
and
literally blind us.
literally,
Yeah.
here's this guy
Yeah.
offering, crisp $100 bills to anyone who walks by.
Yeah, no strings attached.
Those strings attached.
And almost everyone ignores him.
It's unbelievable.
It's kind of crazy, right?
You'd think people would be jumping at the chance.
Yeah, free money. Who doesn't want free money?
Right.
So what was Douglas's takeaway from that?
Well, his point was that, people's beliefs about the world,
Okay.
about how things should be,
Yeah.
were so strong
Yeah.
that they couldn't even perceive
Wow.
the opportunity
That's wild.
right in front of them.
Yeah.
They had this deeply ingrained belief
Okay.
that there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work hard for every dollar you earn.
Right.
So when they were presented with this opportunity, that totally contradicted their belief.
It just didn't compute.
They filtered it out.
Yeah, like their brains were saying like, nope, can't be real.
Must be a catch.
Must be a trick.
Yeah.
So how do we even begin to break free
Right.
from these beliefs?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I mean, we talked about the I am exercise to
Yeah.
kind of uncover them,
Right.
but what's next?
Awareness is the first step,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not enough.
Okay.
We need to actively challenge and replace those limiting beliefs
Okay.
with more empowering ones.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, Douglas talks about this idea of developing self-discipline
Okay.
as a key part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
And he suggests something as simple as
Yeah.
choosing a small, insignificant task
Okay.
and committing to doing it every day.
Like what?
It could be making your bed,
Oh.
drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning, anything really.
Okay, but why something so small?
Well, it's about training your mind
Okay.
to act in alignment with your goals,
Huh.
even when you don't feel like it.
Right.
When you consistently follow through on a commitment, whether it's a small one,
Right.
you build self-trust.
Okay.
You strengthen your willpower.
So it's like working out a muscle,
Yeah, like building a muscle,
but it's for your mind.
but for your mind.
Okay.
And that mental strength is crucial for training
Okay.
because it allows you to stick to your plan,
Right.
even when your emotions are telling you to do otherwise.
It's like that part of our brain that wants to
Yeah,
react immediately to every little thing that's happening.
exactly.
And we got to learn to master that.
Yeah, you got to master it.
Sure.
And speaking of mastering our minds,
Okay.
Douglas recommends a technique that may seem a little unconventional.
What is it?
Self-hypnosis.
Self-hypnosis. That sounds kind of woo-woo.
I know it sounds a bit out there,
Yeah.
but it's actually a very effective way
Okay.
to access your subconscious mind
Mm-hmm.
and reprogram those deeply ingrained beliefs and patterns.
So instead of fighting those beliefs,
Right.
we can work with them
Work with them.
to kind of change them.
Reshape them from the inside out.
Okay. I like that.
Think of your mind like a garden.
Okay.
Your beliefs are like the seeds you've planted.
Okay.
If you want to change the garden,
Yeah.
you can't just wish away the existing plants.
You're going to pull out the weeds.
You got to pull out the weeds, you got to till the soil.
Okay.
Then you can plant new seeds.
Right.
Self-hypnosis is like that tilling process.
Okay.
It prepares your mind
To receive.
to receive and cultivate new, more empowering beliefs.
Okay. So how do we do it?
Well, there are various techniques,
Yeah.
but the core principle is to induce a relaxed,
Okay.
focused state of mind,
Mm-hmm.
similar to meditation,
Right.
and then use positive affirmations and visualizations
Okay.
to implant new beliefs.
So are we essentially bypassing
Yeah,
that conscious, critical part of our minds
exactly.
and speaking directly to the subconscious?
That's the idea.
And because the subconscious is more receptive,
Right. It's more open to suggestion.
it's easier to change those beliefs. Okay, this is all super fascinating.
Yeah.
But I want to know how this all relates to the practical side of trading.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about managing our minds and all this stuff.
Right.
But what about the market itself?
Right. Well, that's where it all comes together.
Okay.
Remember, the market is essentially a reflection
Mm-hmm.
of the collective beliefs and actions of all the individual traders participating.
So like a giant tapestry of hopes and fears,
Yeah.
greed and uncertainty
All woven together.
through buying and selling of assets.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And to navigate this complex landscape,
Mm-hmm.
we need to understand the forces that drive those shifts in sentiment,
Right.
the patterns that emerge from the collective behavior of traders.
And you mentioned significant reference points.
Right.
What are those?
Significant reference points are price levels that have psychological significance
Okay.
to traders.
Okay.
These could be previous highs and lows,
Right.
support and resistance levels, even just round numbers
Okay.
that act as psychological barriers.
So these are the points where traders are more likely to react emotionally
Exactly.
based on, their fears and expectations. Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Imagine a stock that's been trading between
Okay.
$50 and $60 for the past few weeks.
Okay.
$50 becomes a support level,
Okay.
a point where buyers tend to step in
Right.
and push the price back up.
Okay.
$60 becomes a resistance level,
Right.
a point where sellers tend to dominate
Okay.
and push the price back down.
So they're like magnets.
Magnets, yeah.
They're attracting traders' attention
Yeah,
and influencing their decisions.
exactly. And the way traders react at these levels
Okay.
can provide valuable insights into the prevailing market sentiment.
Okay, give me an example.
So, for example,
Sure.
if the price approaches a resistance level
Right.
and we see a surge in buying volume
Yeah?
with traders aggressively bidding up the price,
Okay.
it suggests that they believe the price will break through that resistance
Okay.
and continue higher.
Right.
But if we see a lot of selling volume at that resistance level,
Mm-hmm.
it would indicate that traders are skeptical of a breakout
Okay.
and are more likely to sell into the rally,
Yeah.
potentially pushing the price back down.
Gotcha. So we need to understand the psychology behind the price action, not
Exactly.
just the price action itself.
You got it. You're essentially trying to gauge
The collective beliefs
the collective
of
belief
all the participants.
of all the market participants.
Are they optimistic?
Are they optimistic? Are they confident pushing the price higher?
Okay.
Or are they fearful and hesitant,
Right.
holding the price back?
So it's like this dance between
And it's a dance.
the charts, the psychology, the
You
discipline.
got it.
Yeah.
That's the art and science of trading.
It's not just about, some magic formula.
Rigid set of rules.
Nope. You got to be flexible, adaptable,
Got to learn to speak the language
learn the language of the market
of them, and then have the confidence to act decisively
when the opportunity presents itself.
when opportunity knocks.
We're back for the last part of our deep dive into the disciplined trader, and I'm ready to get into the how-to part. We've talked a lot about beliefs and psychology and all that.
Right.
But how do we actually put this into practice? Like, how do we read the market?
Yeah.
You talked about these significant reference points.
Right. Right.
How do we identify those?
Well, charts are a very powerful tool for visualizing
Okay.
market dynamics.
Okay.
They map price movements over time,
Mhm.
and they reveal patterns and trends
Okay.
that might not be apparent
Right.
just from the numbers.
Okay.
Douglas is particularly fond of point and figure charts.
Point and figure charts, what are those?
So unlike traditional bar charts or candlestick charts,
Right.
which factor in time,
Yeah.
point and figure charts only plot price reversals of
Oh.
a certain magnitude.
Okay.
So
Right.
imagine like a tic-tac-toe board, where a column of X's represents rising prices,
Okay.
and a column of O's represents falling prices.
Okay, so kind of simplifying things.
Yeah, they filter out the noise
Okay.
of minor fluctuations,
Mm-hmm.
and they really highlight those significant shifts in supply and demand,
Okay.
which makes it easier to spot support and resistance levels.
So by taking away the time element,
Exactly.
you get a clearer picture
Got a clearer picture
of these key points.
of those turning points.
Yeah, where things shift.
Yeah, where the balance of power shifts.
Okay, so support and resistance, we talked about those.
Right, those are those psychological battlegrounds.
Yeah.
Where traders tend to react emotionally.
Yeah.
Support is where buying pressure tends to overwhelm selling pressure,
Okay.
preventing further price declines.
Okay.
Resistance is the opposite, where selling pressure tends to override buying pressure,
Okay.
preventing the price from rising further.
Okay. I think I'm starting to see the picture here.
Yeah.
But how do we use this to make better trading decisions?
Well, that's where observation and interpretation come in.
Okay.
It's not about predicting the future with absolute certainty.
Right.
It's more about understanding the probabilities
Okay.
and aligning your actions with the prevailing market sentiment.
So instead of forcing our will on the market,
Right.
we're kind of learning to listen to what it's telling us.
Exactly.
Okay.
For example, let's say the price of a stock is approaching a significant resistance level
Okay.
on the chart.
Mm-hmm.
This is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
We need to observe trader behavior at that level.
Okay.
Is there a surge in buying volume
Yeah.
as traders aggressively bid up the price,
Okay.
suggesting they believe a breakout is imminent?
Okay.
Or is there heavy selling volume, indicating that traders are skeptical
Okay.
and are more likely to sell into the rally?
Right. So we're looking at volume too.
Volume is key.
Okay.
You're essentially trying to gauge the collective beliefs
Okay.
of the market participants.
Yeah. Are they optimistic?
Are they optimistic? Are they confident, pushing the price higher?
Or are they fearful?
Or are they fearful and hesitant,
Holding back.
holding the price back?
This has been a super insightful deep dive.
Yeah, it's been fun.
For our listeners out there, who are trying to master this mental game of trading, what's like the key takeaway here?
Well, remember, trading is as much a psychological journey
Mm-hmm.
as it is a financial one.
Right.
Your beliefs, your fears, your biases,
Yeah.
they all play a role
Right.
in shaping your trading reality.
Absolutely.
By understanding and managing your own psychology, developing self-discipline,
Right.
and learning to read the market's language,
Yeah.
you can create a more empowering
Okay.
and ultimately more profitable trading experience.
This has given us all a lot to think about.
Yeah, a lot to chew on.
It's a good reminder that to be successful in trading, just like in life, we got to master ourselves first.
Right.
Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.